Chapter 4, Varieties and Registers of Spoken and Written Language. We will be dealing with 4 topics under this chapter, namely varieties of English, language varieties, language registers, and British English versus American English. Okay, so for today's lecture, we'll only have varieties of English. So before we begin, as we always do, we emphasize on the importance of why we are studying these topics. And as for varieties of English, indeed, English language variation is important because its contribution of cultural values regards to the different ways of using the language functions or other aspects of language like vocabulary, pronunciation, and so forth. Okay, so for the previous chapters, I think we did a very good job in emphasizing how varying cultural backgrounds of interlocutors definitely affect communication. And as we all know, language is one of the many components of culture. So as much as culture varies, language also varies. I remember one of the words I cited as an example to show cultural differences among people or among countries is the word salvage, right? So we Filipinos take the word salvage as to mean to kill or to sabotage, and it's the complete opposite when it comes to Americans, meaning it as to save. And when you try to look at your dictionary, it's really to save. I just don't know where we Filipinos got the meaning of salvage is to kill or sabotage. Okay, so anyway, that's just one of the evidences how the English language varies. So we have Filipinism, American English, British English, and so on. Okay, let's now define what is a variety of language. It is a form that differs from other forms of the language systematically and coherently. Variety is a wider concept than style of prose or style of language. Okay, so it's another form, it's another version. Okay, it's different from the other. Okay, something is standard, something is not standard. Okay, who standardizes language? Okay, things like this are the ones that we're going to talk about. Okay, so language varies from its structure down to the very basic difference in spelling, orthography, or even in pronunciation. Okay, so varieties of English relate to language user, of course. So who are language users? You are language users. I am a language user. So language is human. This is the element that we use in communicating, in expressing ourselves, in expressing our wants, our needs, our desires, etc. So we use language to communicate, to speak, to everything. Okay? There are 2 varieties identified here. We have regional variety and social variety. What is a regional variety? It is used by people who live in a region or have lived once in that region. So any language that is spoken by the people living in a particular area or place or a region is called a regional variety. While social variety is a bit smaller because this is the language that people use because of the affiliation with a social group. So examples of social groups are group of doctors, group of scientists, group of musicians, artists, bakers, bikers, and many more, a lot more. I think so. I hope you already know the difference between regional variety and social variety. Now we proceed to another relations of language use to these 3 different subjects here. We have field of discourse, the medium, and the attitude. Okay, what are these things? Field of discourse is the activity in which people are engaged. So may it be in a daily communication or conversation between and among members of the family, such as mother and son, mother and daughter, father and son, father and daughter. Okay, me as an instructor lecturing and you as students listening. Okay, these are field of discourse. The medium, it's the channel that we also discussed in the previous chapters. It may be spoken or written depending on the proximity of the participants in the communication. And lastly, the attitude, it is conditioned by the relationship of the participants in the particular situation. For example, in this field of discourse, what is my role in this field of discourse? I am the one lecturing and you are the one listening or studying in a hope to grasp something or to learn something. So our attitude in this process depends on the role that we are taking, okay, and the role that we have. Okay, so both language use and language user Again, let us emphasize who are language users. You are language users. I am a language user. We may communicate in more than one regional or social variety, which is true. Because, for example, I can speak English, Filipino, Ilocano, and Pangasinan. And I also believe that you speak varieties of language or regional language. Perhaps you know Pangasinan and Filipino and English. Maybe some of you know how to speak in Kapampangan, how to communicate in Kapampangan, okay, and all the rest of these regional languages. Okay, or social variety. So the manner I speak or communicate with my colleagues are different from the manner that I speak with my social groups or with my friends. Okay, so I have many languages. So English, Filipino, Pangasinan, Ilocano, sarcasm, vernacular, profanity, right? Curses. Okay. Okay, kidding aside, it's true that we can communicate in more than one regional or social variety. Okay, we may also switch varieties according to the situation. Okay, we have already encountered code switching, haven't we? I do code switch when I'm discussing, especially in the ethics subject, because concepts there are a little difficult to explain in the English language. I need to use my mother tongue for me to explain it very well. Okay, so I do code switch. I transition from speaking the English language to speaking the Filipino language. Okay, and lastly, we may adopt a new regional or social variety. Of course, we can always learn as many languages as we want and as much as our language faculty will allow it. Okay, because you can only adopt a new language also based on how your language faculty can do it for you, how you are capable for doing so. Okay, so more details of each. For regional variation, it is caused mainly by the geographical dispersion. The people go to different territories, which creates distinctions among the use of language. Okay, so when people transfer from one place to another, they have the tendency to carry over the cultural background that they have grown up with, thus creating a variety in that new place that they have transferred in. Okay, so for social variation, there are some factors involved here, like education, socioeconomic group, and ethnic group. There is a significant difference in how educated people speak versus how the uneducated people do. As much as there is also a significant difference in the choice of words of people belonging to specific age range, such as mature people, although not everyone, like in general or by the majority, people who have already grown experiences have the tendency to really select the words that they are going to use when they're speaking with someone or they're communicating with people. Okay. The most important here is that education, because depending on the level of education, you can get prestigious in order to be recognized in the society. Okay, so the language of the educated people are known to be the standard one, in contrast to the language of the uneducated, which is the opposite of standard, non-standard. Okay. So in here, we have varieties of English. We have non-standard, standard, British, American, and other national standards. Okay, in order to have an official use of the English language, it has been standardized. What do we mean by non-standard? This is the language used out of rules, and it is used in a non-appropriate way. And people who use non-standard English are usually the ones who did not go to school or don't have the opportunity to expose themselves in the proper use of the English language. Okay. So standard, on the other hand, the opposite of non-standard, it is the most important thing here is the uniformity in grammar and vocabulary, which is used by English speakers, not necessarily native. Okay. So we have here American, British, and other national standards. American English is a national standard in which American people use the English language in the way that the main part of its community or country has accepted. So what is accepted or standard in America is the language that they are speaking. It's a language that most of the people there are speaking or agreed to become the standard one. And it's the same in British. It's a national standard in which British people use the English language in the way that the main part of its community or country has accepted. Okay, other national standards, we have independent countries which use the English language with their own characteristics, such as Irish, Canadian, New Zealand, among others. Okay, here in our case, in the Philippines, we have Philippinism, we have Philippine English, Carabao English. Okay, so some of the national standards are related either to American English, like Canadian English, or British English, like New Zealand English. Okay, following with the varieties, let's further discuss this one, field of discourse. A speaker uses the varieties according to field and switches to appropriate depending on the occasion. For example, are you going to speak very academically when you're talking with your mom or with your sister or with your friends? Okay, so it differs or it varies accordingly, okay, according to what field of discourse you are in. Okay, to medium, here the speaker, when uses the written way of communication, has to use a lot of expressions or signs to be understood by the reader. So we have all that punctuation marks. Let's be very careful when it comes to written communication because it should be accurate. Okay, check for spelling, for grammar, for the syntax, okay, and all that. The speaker has to reformulate their sentences into the clearer and more effective way. Okay, what is good in the written communication is that we have the chance to rectify the things or the mistakes that we committed. Unlike when it's spoken, we don't have the chance to take them back. Okay, so when we have uttered wrong words, we cannot go back to the time that we have uttered them and then take them back. Okay, to attitude, we use a distinctive attitude to the different situation in which we are involved. We could be formal, stiff, cold, polite, impersonal, or informal, relaxed, warm, casual, or friendly. Okay, medyo baliktad yata yun. So we could be formal, relaxed, warm, casual, friendly, and informal, stiff, cold, polite, and impersonal. Again, depending on the people we are communicating with and depending on the field of discourse. Okay, is it in a classroom where the teacher is speaking and the students are listening and participating in the discussion? Is it a conversation between and among family members or between and among friends? Okay, etc. Okay, another important points which are involved here are acceptability. Native speakers can be found illogical or absurd, or can find others as illogical or absurd just because they cannot understand the use of the phrase or because it sounds impolite. It's not just focused on grammar but also on morphology or word formation and syntax as SY, how sentences are formed or the structure of sentences. Okay. Frequency, we are focused on those expressions which are used extremely frequent or rarely. So check for the spelling. Okay, that is why the frequency of the language is very important to get involved in it. Okay, so the more that we are exposed to a language, then the more that we may be able to adapt it or to embody it and use it. Okay, frequency. Alright, the different varieties of the English language have been made up because of the usage which each country has given to it. Consequently, there are many standard English languages around the world. Okay, this is what I want to emphasize in the study of varieties of English. There may be a distinction between standard and non-standard, but remember that standardization actually greatly or largely depends on the people using the language. So if they have standardized that particular language, if the words are already included in their dictionary, okay, already registered, and then we may call it as standard. So a standard language for a particular country or group of people or speakers can be non-standard to another group because they also have their own standardized language, the ones agreed upon by the speakers in that particular group. Okay? So that's it for varieties of English. Varieties, different forms, iba't ibang versions ng English. We have Carabao English, we have British English, we have American English, Philippinism, and all these things.